This happened when I was a freshman in high school. During this time, I lived at home with my parents and older sister. We lived in what I would describe as a pretty average neighborhood. Our backyard was sort of big, but overall it was a very populated area. So one night, I was at home playing video games in my bedroom. My sister was in her room and my parents were out in the living room. I always liked to play video games in my room, and I had a really good setup in there. I had my gaming chair, big monitor, and a TV as well. I remember that after gaming for a long time, I got to a loading screen. I leaned back in my chair to stretch, and I casually looked to my right out of my bedroom window. The window looked out to the backyard, and at the back of the yard was a small woods. Something caught my eye when I looked out there. It looked sort of like there was a clown looking at me from just inside the woods. At first, I thought surely that wasn't the case. I kept looking and was squinting my eyes to see better. It sure looked like there was a clown there. So I got up from my chair and walked over to the window. Now that I had a better view, I could see that there was in fact a clown there, or at least somebody that was wearing a clown mask. They were standing just a couple of feet into the woods, partially blocked by trees. But the clown was looking right at our house, possibly at my window. It was extremely creepy to see this. I ran out of my bedroom and found my parents in the living room. I told them there was some guy dressed as a clown in the backyard. They followed me to my bedroom window, but when we got there, whoever this guy was now gone. I told my parents where he was and everything. We all went outside after that and looked around the backyard, although I was really creeped out. Luckily, we didn't see or hear anything when we were out there. The woods in our backyard was not that big. It only went back probably 20 feet, and then there was a fence. I was guessing whoever this guy was went through the neighbor's yard. At least he wasn't in our yard anymore. It was a real mystery as to who he was and what exactly he was doing back there. We all went back inside, and I went back to what I was doing. I looked out of my window every so often, but luckily the clown man did not return. The next couple of days were normal, no signs of the clown or anything. But it was less than a week later, and I found myself home alone. My parents were gone at friends, and my sister was at a friend's house also. I was playing video games in my bedroom, and it was probably about 9 o'clock at night. It was the same setup as the previous time. I randomly looked out of my window, which was to my right, about 15 feet away. I saw the clown guy again. This time, he was not in the woods though, but standing in the middle of the backyard, much closer. He was facing me and looking directly at my window. I got up and ran over to the window and covered it with my shades. I then ran out of my bedroom as quickly as possible. I didn't know what to do. Why would the clown guy come back? I called my parents and told them about it. They advised me to call the police if he didn't leave the yard immediately. So I looked out of another window, but I didn't see the guy anymore. I was hoping that meant that he left. I got off the phone with my parents and then looked out of several other windows. I didn't see the clown. Then I headed back to my bedroom. When I was walking in though, I heard a knock at the front door. I went over and checked out the front window and saw the clown. He was standing on the front step. I just moved away from there and ignored it. I went back into my bedroom, put my headphones on, and forced myself to just play video games. I did that until my parents got back home. When they did, the clown guy was long gone. After that night, I kept my bedroom window covered at all times. I also didn't stay home by myself for several weeks because I was too creeped out to. I'm not sure if the clown guy ever came back or not, but I didn't see him or hear from him again. This happened not that long ago. I went to the grocery store one night that was kind of near my house. It was only like 10 minutes away. I was inside the grocery store for maybe 30 minutes. Inside, things were not very busy, and it was maybe 9 p.m. When I left the grocery store, I went back to my car, which was parked at about the middle of the parking lot. There were cars scattered all around, but not too many. I noticed that there was a car parked right next to mine though that wasn't there before. I only really noticed it because there were lots of open spaces around it. The car parked next to mine was a silver-colored sedan. I didn't pay it much attention and started loading my groceries into the back of my car. But when I was just about done, I glanced over at the car that was parked next to me and noticed somebody sitting in the driver's seat. It appeared to be a man, and he was wearing a clown mask. This mask in particular was really creepy looking. It wasn't one of those cheap ones, but a really detailed one. I didn't know why he was wearing it, because it wasn't anywhere near Halloween. It just seemed kind of random and odd. He wasn't looking at me though. I put my cart back and then went to my driver's door and got inside. It was then that I looked over and noticed that the clown guy was looking right at me from inside his car. He didn't wave or move or anything, but was just staring in my direction. I smiled at him, figuring that it was some kind of a joke. Then I started my engine and drove away. As soon as my car started, he started his car as well. When I began driving, he did the same. I watched his car follow mine to the end of the parking lot, and I was worried. Immediately, it seemed like this clown guy was trying to follow me. I left the parking lot and went onto a quiet road, and then that one took me to a busier one. The clown drove behind me the whole way. The roads were pretty quiet with it being later at night. There was not a good chance that he could get stuck in traffic trying to follow me or something. If it was rush hour, that might have been a possibility. Instead, he easily stayed on my tail as I drove down the highway. After maybe 5 minutes there, I was getting worried of what I would do. I couldn't let this guy follow me all the way back home. So when I was driving, I called my boyfriend to tell him the situation. He was really confused when I told him a clown was following me on the highway. He thought I was joking at first and started laughing. I told him that I was serious and this was not a joke. Still, he didn't seem to take it as serious as I was. I told him that I was going to drive to his house. My boyfriend's house is about 5 minutes away from mine. He said that was fine with him and told me not to worry about it. I did feel a little bit better knowing he wasn't too concerned, but still, this clown guy was really creeping me out. It's one thing to dress as a clown later at night, but it's another to follow somebody home. Several minutes later, I exited the highway, followed by the clown. Then I took a quiet road for about a mile before the turnoff for my boyfriend's street. When I turned, the clown behind me did as well. The street was very quiet at this time of night. My boyfriend's house was about halfway down the street and on the right side. When I reached it, I began pulling into the driveway. It seemed as though the clown was going to do the same thing. That's when I saw the door to the house open and my boyfriend running out. He was wearing a clown mask of his own, one that he wore at a Halloween party a couple of years ago. He was holding a yellow wiffle ball bat as well and waving it around like a crazy person. The clown in the car behind me started pulling into the driveway and then stopped. My boyfriend was screaming like a madman and went running straight for the clown's car behind me. Then the clown backed out and drove away before my boyfriend could reach him. I got out of the car and asked my boyfriend if he was out of his mind. I couldn't believe what he was doing. He took his mask off and started laughing, calling the other clown a wimp for running away. We went inside after that, and I ended up being really glad that he did that. It could have been extremely dangerous though. Who knows who that guy in the clown mask was and what he wanted? Maybe that was just his way of disguising himself, and me being a young woman, he was trying to stalk me. I'm really not sure, but I'm glad that my boyfriend considered the whole thing one big joke. He told me that he thought of the idea when I told him I was going to his place. He remembered the clown mask and thought he would out-clown the clown. I'm really glad that it worked. This happened years ago, and I still think about it. During this time, I lived alone in a smaller house. I always considered my neighborhood and city to be safe. I knew a lot of my neighbors, and it was a quiet neighborhood where not that much happened. That's why this story was even more disturbing. One night, I was fast asleep. I had gone to bed at about 10 o'clock when I usually did. At 2 o'clock in the morning, though, I suddenly woke up. Before I could figure out what was going on, I realized that my doorbell was ringing. Now, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the sound of anything can be startling and creepy. I sat up and tried to think of anybody who would ring my doorbell at 2 a.m. They rang it again, and I got out of my bed and left my bedroom. I walked down the hallway into my living room and then looked out of the front window. There was a man dressed as a clown standing on my front step. His face was painted, and it was painted really well. He was wearing a clown costume also, and it wasn't some cheap one that you could get for $20. This man really went all out. I moved back away from the window so that he wouldn't notice me. Then he knocked on the front door. What did this guy want? I moved over to the end of my living room window, which was mostly covered. I was careful to be in a spot where he wouldn't be able to see me. Then I watched him. He kept standing there, just staring ahead at my front door. I watched him the entire time. Then he moved and left my front step. At first, I thought that he was finally leaving, but instead, after walking off my front step, he turned and headed down towards the side of my house. He went out of my sight and was going near my bedroom. I left where I was at the window and walked to the hallway again. Then I went inside of my bedroom. As soon as I got in, I saw the clown looking directly into my bedroom window. I jumped back and left the room in a hurry. I was really creeped out to see that he somehow seemed to know where my bedroom was. I wasn't really sure what to do. About a minute later, I decided to go back in my bedroom and check and see if he was still at the window. I carefully opened up the door and looked. He was gone. I felt better and hoped that this time he was finally gone for good. As I was standing there in my bedroom though, suddenly there was a loud banging sound from my back door. It had to be the clown. He was pounding on the door about as loud as he could. At that point, I called the police. I reported a man dressed as a clown in my backyard banging on my back door. The clown stopped pounding at my door, and I didn't look to check and see if he was gone. I went back into the living room and waited for the police to arrive. Several minutes later, I decided to look out of the windows again. I went to the back window and looked. When I did, I actually saw the clown. He was at the corner of my yard and moved out of it into my neighbor's yard. I kept watching and he went out of sight. Several minutes later, the police got there. I told them what happened and gave them a description of the guy. It would be hard to miss him. The police searched my yard, which wasn't very big, but the guy was gone. They didn't see him in any immediate neighbors' properties, so they didn't go in anybody else's yard. I was told they would drive around the area and look for the guy. In the meantime, if I saw him again, I was told to call back. The police left after that. I stayed up for a while, checking windows, but the clown did not return. And after that night, he didn't come back at all. It was so random. I still wonder who he was and what he wanted. What would have possibly happened if I had answered the door? I'm really glad that I didn't. Maybe it was just some guy trying to be a prankster. I don't know. But it was still one of the creepiest things that I've ever seen. So this story took place just a few weeks ago. It's really bizarre and also scary. I play in a fantasy football league with a bunch of my friends. If anybody doesn't know, in fantasy football, you draft players that are in the NFL, and based on their performances for the week, your team gets points. Your team plays another team every week. There's playoffs and a championship game at the end. Well, in the league that I play with my friends, whoever gets last place in the league has to get punished. Before the season starts, people think of ideas for punishments and we vote on it and decide it. So everybody knew that this year, our punishment was to dress up as a clown. Then the loser would have to walk down one of the busiest streets in our nearby city. Thankfully, I didn't lose, but one of my best friends, Ben, did. My friend Jordan and I decided to go with him for his punishment. We were going to record it and send it to everybody else in the league. We first went to a party supply store and bought a cheap clown mask and costume. Then we wrote on a piece of cardboard, "I suck at fantasy football." We then drove to the city, which was about 15 minutes away. It's a pretty large city and also very busy. When we got there, the sun was setting, but there was still a lot of people out. Ben reluctantly put on his loser clown outfit and we were laughing like crazy. We parked in this little parking lot on the edge of downtown and then walked several blocks. When we got into the heart of the city, Ben had to walk the entire way down the street and back. He kept trying to negotiate and make it a shorter walk, but it was our responsibility to make sure that the punishment was fulfilled. Ben walked on the sidewalk and people were staring at him. We laughed and got our pictures and videos. Then we started to head back. When we did though, we noticed that there was another person dressed as a clown. It was really strange to see. I mean, there were a lot of people around, but I didn't expect to see someone else who looked like a clown. Obviously, we had to have Ben go over and say hi to the other clown. We walked over, and when we got over to him, saw that his mask and costume was a lot better than Ben's. He didn't really seem amused though. The other clown just kind of stood there. Ben attempted a handshake with the other clown, but he left him hanging. He wasn't saying anything either, so we just left. We started walking back to our car, which would take probably less than 5 minutes or so. We walked along the sidewalk, away from where most of the people were. It was a much quieter area where we parked. About a minute into the walk, Jordan said that the clown appeared to be following us. I looked back and saw him walking behind us, but a long ways away. We all found this funny and figured that the guy was just joking around. We kept walking, and surprisingly, the clown remained behind us. Eventually, we crossed the street and had to go just another block to get to the car. When we crossed the street, it was much quieter, and hardly anybody else was around. The clown then crossed the street as well. He appeared to be getting closer. I found it a little bit strange that he was still behind us. Soon we made it to the parking lot, and at that point, saw the clown had started to run after us. We all hurried to get inside of the car. We were laughing, but I honestly found it a little bit creepy. I have a smaller SUV, and I was driving, with Jordan in the passenger seat and Ben in the back. I started the car and then watched and laughed as the clown kept running after us. When the clown reached the parking lot, he stopped. I started driving out, and we would have to go right past him. He was now standing by the exit. When I was starting to drive by the clown, he turned and faced us. Then I saw him pulling something out of his pocket. I didn't know what it was because I looked away to focus on the road. But the next thing I knew, I heard a loud noise come from the back of the car and a crashing of glass. Then I heard Ben say that the clown threw a brick at us. I drove out of there, and the back window was half smashed. Everybody in the car was fine, and Ben didn't get any glass on him or anything. We called the police though and reported the clown, and were glad to get away from him. I thought he was harmless. It was creepy that he followed us, but we had no idea that he would pull a brick out and throw it at us. The whole situation is so crazy, I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't there myself. It made for the most memorable fantasy football punishment ever. I had a terrifying experience with a clown back when I was in high school. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. It all started one night when I was at work. Back then, I lived with my parents and worked a job at a nearby convenience store. I walked to and from work, and I would ride the bus to school every day. Between work and school, I was pretty busy. So I started work from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. on this night. Work went by as usual, and when I got off, I left to walk home. The walk would take me about 15 minutes on most days, and I didn't mind it. At my job, I would just be sitting at a counter most of the time, so walking afterwards felt nice. Also, the neighborhood was generally really quiet. I never felt unsafe or had anything scary happen. It did seem a little bit creepy at night sometimes because of how quiet it would be. After leaving work, I started walking along the sidewalk. There were sidewalks for my entire walk home, but I did have to turn a couple of times. About 2 or 3 minutes into the walk, I noticed somebody kind of up ahead. They were standing on the grass between the sidewalk and the street, kind of randomly. It was dark out and they were far away, but when I approached, I soon realized that it was a clown, or at least it was somebody dressed up in a clown costume. It was really creepy looking, and I knew that I would have to walk past him. I didn't really want to, but I did. I tried not to look when I got close, and the clown didn't say anything to me. When I passed it by, I could sense him looking at me though. Still, I didn't look. I just walked past and kept going towards my house. At first, he appeared to stay where he was, but when I got like 20 feet away, I heard him move, and it sounded like he went onto the sidewalk. I got about 50 feet ahead of him, but then I heard him walking behind me. I hoped that he wasn't following me, but I had a bad feeling that he was. When I turned, I looked over and saw that the clown was walking a distance behind me. He turned exactly when I did. There was no question that he was following me. I kept going and tried to walk a little bit faster. I didn't look back, but listened closely in case the clown was going faster as well. He didn't seem to be getting any closer to me though. I crossed another street, which he also did. Now I only had a short distance to go before arriving home. When I got to my street, the clown walked after me. That's when I looked over my shoulder for the first time. He was there, maybe 40 feet back now, and was looking at me. I walked faster, and by now my heart was racing. I was really freaked out. I wanted to start running, but was afraid that the clown would do the same if I did. Instead, I remained as calm as I could and kept walking. Soon, I made it to my driveway. I felt a lot better, but still had to make it inside the house. I walked up and got to the front step. It was at that point that the clown reached my driveway. Then I heard him starting to walk up the driveway after me. This made me really nervous, and I scrambled to use my house key to unlock the door. I was panicking, and that was causing me to go slower than usual. I heard the footsteps quickly approaching as I fumbled around with the key. At last, I had unlocked the door. I went inside extremely quick and then slammed the door and locked it behind me. I heard my mom say from the other room, "What was that?" She then called out my name, and I heard the doorknob turn behind me. I ran over to the living room and found my parents. I told them about the clown guy following me home. We went over to the door to look, but he was now gone. I told them the story, and my parents said that they would drive me to and from work for my next shift. We figured that the clown had left, and we were all very creeped out by this situation. Later that night, I went to bed, and the clown didn't come back or anything. But the next morning, I got up to catch the bus for school. It was really early and still dark out because school started at 7:25. So at about 6:50, the bus would usually arrive at my house. And after getting ready for school, I headed out. I left my house at about 6:45 and started walking to the end of my driveway where I would stand and wait for the bus. When I was beginning to walk down the driveway, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked and saw the same clown coming around the corner from the side of the garage. I couldn't believe my eyes. I turned and ran back inside the house and called the police right there. Then I found my parents and told them what was going on. We all stayed inside the house until the cops got there. They found the clown hiding in the backyard. I couldn't believe it. I was sure that he had left the previous night. After that, I was able to get a ride with my parents to school because I missed the bus, but I was just grateful to be okay. It still blows my mind that the clown was there in our yard all night. We should have called the police the previous night after he had followed me home. We had just assumed that he left. I guess he camped out on the side of the garage, which was actually a really good hiding place. That guy was a total creep. This remains the scariest moment of my life. I'm now scared of clowns because of it. This happened several years ago. I happened to be driving in the city one night and was driving home afterwards. I lived about 40 minutes away from the city in a relatively quiet suburb. When I was driving back, I remember I had just left downtown and it was pretty late, almost midnight. I pulled up to a stoplight, which was red. As I was sitting there, I saw a car pull up beside mine, and I could hear the loud engine. It sounded bad, like the car was going to break down at any moment. Because of this, it caused me to look over, and when I did, I saw the driver of the car was wearing a clown mask. He looked over at me, and then he pointed. It was kind of creepy with it being late at night and stuff, but I laughed it off. I smiled and waved at him, and a moment later, the light turned green, and he sped off in front of me. I drove home, mostly just taking this one long and busy highway that went all the way from the city, right near where my house was. At this time of night, the road was very quiet, and I didn't see many other cars at all. I was able to make it home faster than usual because of this. It was barely 30 minutes later when I had reached the exit of the highway that I would take to go home. But just before the exit, I noticed a car in front of me. It was the same car that the guy with the clown mask was in. I recognized it because of how old and beat up it was. He was turning at the same place where I would turn. I didn't even know he had still been on this road. He was driving slower now, and I caught up with him. My street was not all that long, and I hadn't seen this car before. I pulled onto the street behind him, and thankfully, he drove past my driveway, and I pulled into it. I watched him keep driving down the street. I got out of my car and began to walk up to my house. As I had only made it a few feet away from my car, though, I started to hear screeching down the road. I took a couple of steps back to look. Then, I watched as the car came roaring back down the street towards my house. I watched the car speed at an unusually fast pace down my street and pull right into my driveway. I scrambled to get inside and quickly got to my doorstep and unlocked the door. I heard the car come to a stop in my driveway, and then the door open and slam shut. Finally, I was able to open my door and I got inside and locked it behind me. I didn't even want to look outside, but at the same time, I felt like I had to. I peeked out my living room window, hoping that I would not be visible from the outside. As I did, I watched the clown guy get out of his car and walk up to my front step. He then just stood there. He was just staring at my front door, about 10 feet away. I was frozen still, too afraid to move or let him out of my sight. I feared if I moved, he would see me, and I did not know if he currently knew where I was. I didn't think he did, because he never looked directly at me. He would occasionally look around, but never at me. This went on for almost 30 minutes. I considered calling the police, but again, was too afraid to move. Finally, at last, I watched him walk away slowly back to his car. He then got inside and drove away. I watched outside for another 5 minutes or so, just in case he were to come back, before I finally left the front window. I checked the window again probably 10 times before I finally went to bed that night. Thankfully, he never came back. I've always wondered who he was, and if it was just a coincidence he drove to my street. After all, he was driving ahead of me on the highway most of the time. It still gives me the creeps to think about it, though. This occurred several months ago. It was a cool spring night, and I was fast asleep in my house. I'm a female and live with my husband. However, he was out of town for the weekend on business. I was suddenly woken up in the middle of the night, a little past 1 a.m. I had no idea what woke me, but I was suddenly wide awake. I sat up in bed and looked around the room. It was mostly dark as all the lights were off. Then my eyes wandered to the bedroom window. That's where I saw a clown face looking right at me. Not a guy with a clown mask, but a guy who had literally painted his face to look like a clown. And he did a pretty good job too. I immediately screamed. When I saw him, he quickly disappeared and ran away. He was now out of my sight, but I was terrified. I grabbed my phone and called my husband. Luckily, he answered. He told me to call the police. As I was still on the phone with him, I got up and walked over to the window and looked outside. The clown guy was gone by now, and I couldn't see him at all through the window. But as I was still looking around our front yard out the window, I heard the sound of glass breaking at the opposite end of the house. I got a terrible feeling. After hearing this, I ended my call with my husband to call the police. Then, I ran as fast as I could to my bedroom door and closed it and locked it. I then started to hear movement inside the house on the other end. This was followed by the sound of a man laughing hysterically. It was one of the creepiest moments ever. I was on the phone with the police telling them to please hurry. They said they would be there as fast as they could, and I stayed on the line with them. I heard the clown walking through the house and slowly getting closer. As he did, his creepy laugh continued. I was dreading the moment he would reach my bedroom door, and eventually he got to the hallway. I think he went to the other bedroom first, but then, about a minute later, I heard the footsteps reach the end of the hallway and go right outside the bedroom I was in. It was silent, and then I heard his creepy laugh right outside the door. I moved quietly as far away from the door as I could possibly get. Then, I saw the knob turn, and thankfully stop. The door was locked, and I then heard 3 calm knocks, followed by a quieter laugh. Then, things got quiet for a few seconds. I was holding my breath, and then he started banging on the door, seemingly as hard as he could. This guy had to be insane or something. I was told the police were within a minute away, and I was just hoping they would get there faster. The guy was banging on the door, and I didn't think it would last too long. Then, out of the window, I thought I finally saw the police lights. Sure enough, it was them, and the sound of a siren soon got louder and louder. The banging on the door stopped, and things got quiet again. The police were at the house a very short time later, and they were able to get inside, and I finally left the room. However, the clown man was gone. He had left out the back door and left it wide open. The police searched the area, but couldn't find him. The only thing found was his red rubber nose in our backyard. My husband got home the next day, thankfully, and the next time he went out of town, I went with him. It's been a few months, but I still get scared that the clown might come back sometime. I'm going to tell you a very strange experience I had that happened just last year. I worked at a grocery store then that was pretty close to my house. One night, I got off of work at 10 p.m., and on my way out of the store, I picked up some chicken and potato wedges that they had in the deli area. It was one of my favorite things to get at work when I got food there. It had been a long day of work, and I was starving, so hungry that I could hardly wait to eat. After I got the food and left the store, I walked through the now quiet parking lot to my car. I was parked at the far back of the parking lot, which is where I usually was. I got to my car, went inside, and began eating the chicken. It always tasted so good after work when I would be super hungry. I was just chowing down without a care in the world, and also on my phone, when out of nowhere I was interrupted by a knock coming from my passenger side window. I looked over and just about dropped everything when I saw a creepy looking clown looking right inside my window. It was probably the last thing I was expecting to see. I was quite creeped out by this. There was no chance I was going to lower the window or open the door. The clown just kept looking directly at me the entire time, staring. I noticed that the clown was holding several balloons in his hand. Whoever this was went to great lengths with the clown costume. If it was Halloween night or the middle of the day, I might have been entertained by this, but it was nowhere near Halloween, and it was after 10 o'clock at night. The clown had moved his head closer and closer, and his face was now pressed all the way up against my passenger side window. Then he tried the door handle. Of course, it was locked, but after failing to get inside, he then banged on the window. I wasn't staying there any longer, and I put my car into reverse and backed up, then sped out of there. The clown watched me the entire time as I did. I just wanted to get away from him, and I didn't notice until I got home that he had tied a balloon on a string around my passenger side door handle. After I got out of my car, I removed it. I popped the balloon and was going to throw it away, but I then noticed something inside the now deflated balloon. I took it out to see it was like a folded up piece of paper. After unfolding it, I was shocked. It was a printed photo, and it looked like it was taken with the flash on at nighttime, and the picture was of my house. I have no clue who that guy dressed as a clown was, or why he did this to me. I didn't notice anything strange happening or anything like that. Nothing like this has happened since, either. This story happened several years ago. I'm 22 years old now, and at the time I believe I was about 14 or 15. It was the summertime, and I lived at home with my parents in our pretty average house. It was nighttime, and I had gone to bed after a hard day of playing video games and enjoying the warm weather. I was sleeping great until I woke up in the middle of the night for seemingly no reason. I rolled over in bed to see on my clock that the time was almost 3 in the morning. I then casually looked around my dark room and then out the window which was beside my bed. When I did, I saw there was the face of a clown looking directly into my bedroom window and staring right at me. It was a really creepy looking clown. My heart immediately started pounding and I jumped back. When I did, the clown suddenly ducked down from the window and then disappeared out of sight. I then screamed and ran out of my room terrified. I ran into the living room, and my parents must have heard me yelling because I heard the door to their room open and saw them come out. I told them there was a clown right outside my bedroom window. They went into my bedroom and looked around, and after that went outside and walked around the house. Of course, whoever had been there was now gone. When my parents came back inside, my mom told me that maybe I was just having a bad dream. It did seem really strange for something like this to happen, because our neighborhood had a really good reputation of low crime. In fact, we rarely ever had people knock on our door. It took me a while, but I was able to eventually fall back asleep. The next day, I started to think that I probably was just dreaming the whole thing the night before. It just seemed a little too strange for even myself to believe, and it all happened so fast. I was feeling better at that point, and wasn't scared at all to go to bed. When the time came, I got ready to go to sleep, turned the lights off, and laid down. I was getting very relaxed and starting to feel sleepy, but then I thought I heard something from my window. It was a very small and quiet noise. Not a knocking or a scratching, but the sound of the window just being touched. Had it not been completely silent in my room, I definitely would have never heard it. I opened my eyes and looked to the window. When I did, I was staring directly at a man in a creepy clown mask. This time I knew I wasn't dreaming or imagining this, because I hadn't even fallen asleep yet. I was in shock and felt like I couldn't move. The clown was just staring at me. Finally, I started screaming again like a little kid and got up and ran to my parents' room. They heard me once again and got up. They then went into my room, and this time I heard my dad yelling. He had seen the clown, and he then ran outside to chase the guy. The guy ended up getting away long before my dad could catch up with him. My parents called the police after that, and they came out to our house and talked to us. The guy that was dressed as a clown was never found, but he never came back either. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he was trying to do. This happened many years ago. I was younger and in college, and during the summers I would work at a sports stadium in the city where they had games to earn extra money. This meant I would drive back home really late at night and oftentimes get back to my parents' house after midnight. I lived about 40 minutes away from where I worked, but when it was really late I could make it home in under 30 because how there was usually no traffic. I was driving home one night after a late game. I made it about halfway home to where it changed from being city to much more of a country and rural area. I was the only car driving down the road with woods on both sides. As I was driving, I thought I noticed something on the road up ahead and I slowed down. It looked like a person, but as I got closer, I could see that it was someone dressed as a full clown. They had a clown mask and a whole clown outfit, and they were even holding several balloons in their hands. I had to nearly come to a complete stop. The clown stood facing the woods, but was standing on the road in the driving lane that I was in. As I got closer, he slowly turned to face me. I was really creeped out by this. I was going maybe 5 miles per hour and went into the opposite traffic lane to pass the clown. As I did, he started to walk towards me. He was walking really slow, so I sped up my car and drove off. The farther I drove away, the more I realized just how creepy it was. The clown was standing in the road with woods on both sides, and I didn't see a car or anything parked, so I have no idea how he got there. There wasn't really any houses in the area or businesses either. I was just happy to be away from him. Shortly after that, though, I heard the noise my car would make when I needed to get more gas, and I looked to see that the tank was almost empty. I pulled into the next gas station that I saw, which was a quiet little one with only 2 pumps, and nobody else was there. I paid, and then filled up my car with fuel. As I got done and was about to get back into my car, I heard a noise coming from the distance. The woods on the edge of the gas station's property ran along the side of the road, and I saw the clown peek its head out from behind a tree. It was really dark out, so it took me a minute to realize what it was at first, but when I did, I was terrified. After the clown and I seemingly made eye contact, he emerged from the woods and began running at a full sprint straight for me. I quickly got inside my car and started it, then drove away from there as fast as I could. I drove home, and thankfully my parents were still awake because they helped me calm down. That way I could finally get to bed. I never saw that clown again. I don't know who it was or how he got to the gas station so fast. It was very strange for someone to be dressed as a clown, wandering around the woods with no houses nearby at that time of night. This story took place only about a year ago. I was home by myself at the time as my wife was out shopping. It was roughly 10 p.m., and I was watching some sports center on the living room TV. It was interrupted by the sound of a knock coming from my front door. Based on the time of night, it was strange for this to happen, so I got up and looked out the front window to see who was there before opening the door. I saw there appeared to be a man out there with a clown mask on, standing at my front door. I figured this was some teenage kid trying to be funny and pull a prank on me or something. I walked to the front door and opened it. When I opened the door, though, I saw the guy standing there about 10 feet away from me, staring at me. Now that I had a better view of his face, I could see that the guy was not wearing a clown mask, but had painted his face completely white, had a red nose on, and appeared to be his real hair dyed red, although it was possible it was a wig. The guy was wearing relatively normal clothes, aside from looking like a clown, but he didn't appear to be a teenage kid. Instead, it looked like a full-grown man. He stood there just staring at me. I asked him what he wanted and why he had knocked on my door. He just kept on staring at me. I told the man to get off my property, and I started to close my door. He just kept standing there, though. I turned and went back inside. Then I was sure to lock the door before looking out the front window again to see if the man had gone. When I looked, he wasn't there anymore, and I didn't see him. I was glad he had finally left, and was a little weirded out by the whole situation. But not even a minute later, I heard the sound of glass shattering coming from the back end of my house where the kitchen was. I knew it had to be the clown guy. I moved over to the hallway and went into the bathroom, not knowing how dangerous this guy was. I expected to hear movement from inside the house, but I didn't hear anything at all. I then went back over to where I heard the noise and saw that a large rock had been thrown through the dining room window, but nobody appeared to be in the house. I wasn't sure if this guy was inside hiding or not, so I went back into my hallway bathroom and locked myself inside, then called the police. I waited there and didn't hear anything else for the 10 minutes or so until the police arrived. Then I came out of the bathroom and met with the officers, who searched my house up and down but didn't find anyone. After that, they went out into my backyard and searched the property. To my surprise, they located the man dressed as a clown hiding deep in the woods in my backyard. He was found with several large rocks in his pockets. I'm not sure if he was planning to come back and throw more rocks at my house or use them as weapons or what, but I'm glad he ended up being caught. This story took place 2 summers ago. I was walking my dog Albert one night after work. It was something that I did almost every day. Usually I would walk Albert earlier, but I had been working late that day, so I went out just as the sun was setting at about 8:30 p.m. or so. I would walk around the neighborhood and into some other neighborhoods that were close by. It was a pretty nice area with a lot of houses, and normally I'd see a few other people out walking dogs and such, but at this time it was pretty empty. I went about 30 minutes out, but before turning back, I let Albert run around in the grass a little. As I did, I noticed something off in the distance. It was someone wearing a clown costume. The costume was really well done. He was wearing a whole clown outfit, and instead of a mask, appeared to have his whole face painted, and was also wearing a wig. It seemed really weird to me immediately, because it wasn't Halloween, and he didn't appear to be with anyone. He just seemed to kind of be walking up and down the street. Unfortunately for me, I had to walk past him to get home. I waited there at the park for a few minutes to see if he would walk away first, but then Albert seemed to notice him and let out a few barks. Albert is a French bulldog, so he's pretty small and not very intimidating, but he still likes to bark at people a lot. As he did, I saw the clown stop walking and turn his head over to look at us. He then turned his head back and walked away. Once he was gone, I headed back with Albert. I didn't notice the clown at all anymore until about 10 minutes later. I heard the sound of someone walking behind me, not very close, maybe about 100 feet back or so. Immediately, I got a bad feeling that it was the clown. I didn't want to stop and look behind me, so I just kept walking until I got to the next street corner, and when I did, I casually looked behind me to see that it was in fact the clown that was walking behind me. I continued to walk home with the clown tailing a far ways back. The longer he followed me and the closer I got to home, the more nervous I became. For a few minutes, I didn't hear the clown at all, so I turned around and was relieved to not see anyone. But just a few minutes later, I heard the footsteps once again. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of the footsteps change to the sound of someone running. I looked behind me and saw the clown running directly at me and Albert with a huge, creepy grin on his face. At that point, I knew nothing else but to start running myself. I sprinted as fast as I could. Luckily, I'm in pretty good shape, and so is Albert. Even though his legs are pretty short, he was able to keep up with me as I sprinted down the street. I took a turn at the next block, and even though it wasn't the way home, I was trying to lose the clown. Then when I was at the end of that street, I turned again. At last, I stopped hearing the clown and looked behind me to see that he was finally gone. I walked a few more blocks and then went back to the way home. I was checking my surroundings constantly the entire way back. I was so glad to make it back safely without the clown following us, and decided I would try to avoid walking Albert at night from then on. I went to bed that night and slept great. But when I woke up the next morning, I opened the blinds to my bedroom window and noticed something. On my bedroom window, there was a balloon with the string taped to it. I got the chills when I saw it. The creepiest part is that I had slept with my windows cracked open all night, something that I often did during the summertime to get some fresh air in the house. I figured it had to be the clown that left the balloon, and it creeps me out thinking he was outside my window that night. But who he was or what he wanted, I still don't know. My wife and I live somewhat out in the country. It's not super out there, but we have a decent-sized yard with a woods on our property, and we don't have too many houses on our street. One night, my wife had gone to bed already, and I was staying up late watching a sports game on TV in the living room. When the game was over, I turned off the TV and then turned off the lights in the living room. As the lights went out, that gave me a clear image of our front yard, and something caught my eye as it did. I noticed there was someone dressed as a clown, complete with a mask and everything, just standing in the front yard staring directly at me. It was extremely unusual in my neighborhood to see anybody walking down the street, and we had a fairly long driveway, so I was shocked at the sight of a clown in the front yard. He didn't take his eyes off me, and I walked over to the front door. The closer I got, the creepier the clown looked, and I opened the front door just slightly and stuck my head out. He was pretty far away, but I wasn't going to take any chances. I had planned to yell at the clown and ask him who he was and what he wanted, but shortly after I opened the front door, I saw the clown run away and disappear off into the woods. Now this was also concerning, as those were our woods, but I hoped he would just run off and that would be that. I stayed up a little while longer, even went all around the house making sure every window and door was locked before finally deciding I would head to bed. I fell asleep rather quickly, but was woken up sometime in the night by my wife. She said to me, "Do you hear that?" I listened closely, but heard nothing. She then told me that she woke up to what sounded like someone knocking on the front door. Just then, there was more knocking. It was like a really fast and constant knock. Not a very hard knock, but just very constant and rather fast. This time, the knock continued for a good 15 seconds straight before stopping. I figured it had to be the clown. I told my wife about seeing the clown in the yard, and she suggested calling the police. I slowly got out of bed as the knocking started up again. This time the knocking did not stop and just continued at the same fast pace that it had been at before. It was seeming like it was slowly getting louder and louder. I slowly walked towards the living room and tried my best to remain out of sight the entire time of the clown. Once I got there, I could barely see that it was in fact the clown that had returned to the window of the front door. As he continued to knock, I started to hear laughing from the clown, a really creepy laugh. At that point, I yelled in a loud and firm voice that I had already called the police and they were on their way. Of course, I hadn't actually called the police yet, but I wanted to see if I could scare him off. It seemed to work, because I didn't hear any more knocking after that, and he seemed to walk away. I don't know why that clown went to our house, or how he even found us. This story happened years ago when I was a kid. I think I was about 10 years old or so. I remember that my parents took me to this really big park that was sort of near our house. We lived kind of by the city, so the parks were always really crowded. It was a weekend, so the park was especially busy. I think there was some kind of event going on, because there was people everywhere. I remember noticing a clown almost immediately, and the clown waving at me. I was kind of creeped out by clowns, so I sort of waved and then walked away. Me and my parents walked towards another area of the park, where there was a bunch of stuff going on, such as games and even a live band in one area. We played a few games and walked around. There was some food and things like that. It was overall a fun time, and eventually we left to go to the grocery store. After we were done shopping, we were walking back to our car when I noticed there was a van parked a few spaces away from us. And just for a second, I looked over and thought I saw the clown in the driver's seat duck down. It was a little odd to see a clown driving a van. But like I said before, I wasn't much of a fan of clowns, so I just put it out of my head, and me and my parents went home. Later that night at home after dinner, I went outside to play around with my basketball hoop in the driveway like I often did. But when I got outside, I saw a van across the street parked on the side of the road, and once again the clown was driving. He ducked down again when I saw him, but this time he raised his head back up slowly and smiled at me. Then he began to wave. I ran back inside the house as fast as I could and told my parents, but by the time they made it outside, we all saw the van driving away down the street. He never did come back after that, thankfully, but I get creeped out thinking back on that every time. This story took place about 5 months ago. I live in a house sort of out in the country. There's not a lot of people that live in my neighborhood, and the houses are spaced apart a little bit. I like it because I'm into wildlife, and I have a decent-sized woods on my property. One night, at about 10 p.m., I was stepping out into my deck to get something, and I heard some noises coming from just inside the woods. I see deer a lot, but these noises sounded like something bigger. Still, I assumed it was probably just a deer, but I thought that it might be a bear. I stepped out farther onto my deck and looked out to the entrance of the woods that was about 50 feet away. It was dark out, and I only had a little light from my deck, so I couldn't really see anything. The noises pretty much stopped, and after about 2 or 3 minutes, I went back inside. The next day, I walked out into my backyard and into the woods to see the area where I had heard the noises the night before. I got a little ways into the woods when I saw a clown mask on the ground. It was one of the more creepy-looking clown masks that I have seen. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it, but I figured some teenager had wandered into my woods or something. It just seemed strange to me because my woods is very large, and I know my neighbors well, and the ones with kids aren't the type to do this sort of thing that I was aware of. I picked up the clown mask and brought it back to show my wife. We ended up having a laugh about it. But that same night, I was watching TV at sometime around 11 o'clock when I started to hear some noises once again coming from my backyard. But it wasn't trees and leaves being moved around like it was the night before. It was the noise of screams. It sounded like a bunch of people, all just screaming and yelling. I couldn't make out any words in all the noise, but it sounded like it was coming from just inside my woods once again. I went out to my deck again and turned on the lights. The screams continued for about 10 seconds until I yelled into the woods asking who was there. Then they all stopped. Everything became silent. I expected to hear some noise from them, but I just heard nothing at all. Then I got a call on my phone from my neighbor, asking what the noises were coming from my backyard at this hour. I told him I didn't know what was going on. I then went back inside, but kept a close eye out on my backyard. There were no more noises that night, and the next day I once again went back out to the woods, and this time got a little bit farther in, before seeing at least 10 clown masks on the ground, all laid out in a circle. They were all very creepy-looking masks, and it gave me the chills. I haven't had any more incidences like this since then, and I don't know what was going on with the clown masks, if they were kids trying to prank me or something else. Either way, it was pretty creepy. This story is one of the scariest things to happen in my childhood. It happened when I was 7 years old. This was back about 20 years ago or so, and I had recently gotten a Game Boy for my birthday. I took it everywhere and played it non-stop. I was on a Little League baseball team back then, and I don't remember much about it, but I know that on this night I had a practice that my mom took me to. On the way back home, she stopped at McDonald's, and we both got out to go inside. I remember it was dark out, and I'm not sure what time it was, but it wasn't very busy and the parking lot was pretty quiet. She parked around back, and we went inside and ordered. As my mom was ordering, I realized I had left my Game Boy in her car. I decided to go back out to the car and get it by myself. I walked away from my mom and into the parking lot, and around to the back where she had parked. When I got there, I noticed a van drive slowly through the parking lot and parked next to my mom's car. As I approached the car, I saw the passenger's door to the van open and a clown that looked just like Ronald McDonald step out. He was looking right at me and smiled big and said hello. I wasn't really a fan of clowns at all, and I just kind of waved at him, then tried to open the door to my mom's car, but realized that it was locked. I remember the clown then told me he was Ronald McDonald. I said hi, and then decided it would be best if I went back inside. Even though I was a little kid, the clown just creeped me out in the situation that we were in. I I started to turn, but the clown then asked me if I liked Happy Meals. I said yes, and he pulled out the latest toy that was in the Happy Meals. I remember I always liked to collect the toys they gave out back then, and this one was one of the cooler ones. It was some action figure thing, and the clown had 4 of the 8 that you could collect, and it interested me a little bit. He told me he'd like to give them all to me for free, and that it was my lucky day. I should have known better, but I figured it was a good idea, so I told him I'd like him. He opened the side door to his van, and inside I saw a pile of toys ranging from cars to action figures and all kinds of other ones. I started to walk a little closer when I heard my mother's voice calling to me. The clown then jumped inside the side door of the van, and I noticed another man in the driver's seat yell at the clown to go, and then he shut the door in my face. I turned to my mom, who was now sprinting in my direction. I went to her as the van sped out of the parking lot. My mom hugged me and gave me a lecture about talking to strangers, then asked me about what happened. At the time, I was a little kid, but over the years I've thought about this all the time and how I possibly narrowly avoided being abducted. When I was a kid, me and my friends used to go to this one park by our houses all the time. We lived in a large neighborhood with lots of houses, and there was this big park that had some open fields and other things that we would go to. We would play whatever games we were into at the time. We were about 10 years old on this night when we went to the park to play football. It was about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and it was starting to get dark out just a little bit. We would usually play until it got dark, because that was the time when most of our parents wanted us to come home. It was me and my friends Jordan, Brian, and Owen this time, and we played until sunset. It became dark, and we decided that the next score would win the game. By that time, the park had been completely empty for a little while, and on the side near a pond and a road, we saw a really tall guy dressed as a clown slowly emerge holding a balloon. It wasn't near Halloween time, and this guy looked to be well over 6 feet tall. As soon as we noticed him, we all got the creeps. We stopped and watched what he would do. He slowly walked into the park and then gave us a slow and creepy wave. Then he started slowly walking towards us. Me and my friends had seen enough, and we all started walking to leave. We left the park and then all went our separate ways, with the clown still walking behind us at a far distance. When we split up, I noticed that I was the one that the clown seemingly decided to follow. He was really far back, but I could see him slowly walking behind me down the street, holding his balloon. I walked for a while, then I couldn't take it anymore, and I sprinted the rest of the way home without looking back. I was sure that I had lost him, and I didn't see or hear him when I got home, and I went inside. I figured it was just a guy trying to scare kids for no reason, and I felt very safe at home. When I got into my bedroom to go to bed that night, I noticed immediately that my bedroom window was open a crack. Right away, I feared the worst, that the clown had gotten into my room or something. I was too embarrassed to ask my parents to search my room for a creepy clown for me, so I looked myself. To my relief, my bedroom was completely empty, and I felt better. I realized I was probably paranoid, and my mom or dad had opened my window. I went to bed feeling good, but awoke in the night to the sound of my window sliding upwards. I looked over and saw a man wearing a ski mask entering the room about halfway in. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, and he quickly went back out the window and ran away. My mom came running into my room, and I told her what happened. My dad ran outside, but the man was long gone by that time. We called the police, and they came and talked to me, and I realized that the man was likely the same one who had dressed as a clown. He must have slid my window open slightly, then came back at night. The scary part is I don't believe the man was ever found. This story took place on Halloween night 6 years ago. I was a 16-year-old high school kid at the time and lived with my mom and sister. My mom went to take my little sister trick-or-treating and then go to a friend's house, and I decided to stay home alone. I was too old to trick-or-treat, but I also didn't have any plans with friends, so I just stayed home and watched some scary movies. We lived in a neighborhood that wasn't too busy, but I did have a bowl of candy to hand out to people who came. All in all, just 6 people showed up in total, and I ended up eating more of the candy myself than I gave out. I turned off the lights to the house at 9 p.m., so nobody else would stop by. Then I made some popcorn and put on another movie. Then at about 10 p.m., I heard the noise of a car driving by outside. I assumed that it was my mom and sister returning, and I kept watching the TV I had on in the living room. I didn't hear them come inside after about a minute, so I went over to the window and peeked out. What I saw was a small SUV parked in front of our house on the street. It was a little strange because I didn't recognize it to be somebody that lived on our street. Then I saw the doors open, and 4 large people who had to be adults get out, except they were all wearing clown masks. They all started to walk up my driveway. When I saw this, my heart started pounding, and I immediately got a little scared. I hoped they were just trick-or-treating, but by the size of them, they were not young at all. Then I saw 3 of them go in different directions towards the back of my house, and 1 go to the front door. I quickly ran away and went upstairs to my room. I hid inside and then heard a knock on the front door. There was no chance I was going to answer it, and I stayed in my room pacing back and forth thinking of what to do. I called my mom, but she didn't answer. Then I heard the sound of glass breaking coming from downstairs. I dialed the police at that point and whispered to them that my house had just been broken into and gave them my address. At the same time as this, I was trying hard to focus on the noises from downstairs, if anybody was going to be coming upstairs or not. I don't know what I was thinking, but I panicked and hung up the phone. I hadn't even listened for how long the police would take to show up. I then heard footsteps starting to come up the stairs, and I became extremely scared. I knew I didn't have any locks on my door, and if they decided to come in my room, they would likely see me. I decided to open up my window and jump out. I felt it was a manageable jump for me, and I didn't want to be in my room if the clown went in, so I opened it up and jumped out. I hurt my feet as I hit the grass, and I tumbled over, but all in all, I was just fine. I ran as fast as I could to my neighbors down the street and pounded on their door. They were the neighbors I knew the best, and they let me in right away. I explained to them what was going on, and they let me wait in their house. Eventually, the police showed up, and 2 of the 4 men were arrested, with the other 2 being found several hours later. It made for my most scary Halloween.